Hey everybody, Roy Rogers from the Second Sons and White Book here with another one of those how and the why of it videos. But this time I'm here with kind of a special edition. With the videos I've done so far have been focused on the competitive metagame for mostly in franchise players, although the first couple videos I did were also pretty new player friendly. But this one is specifically designed for new players. New players in particular who are interested into getting into competitive play. So this is not for the enfranchised players. So if you are a longtime player, if you are looking for the hot tips on the current metagame, this is not the video for you. Okay, I'm going to be doing one pretty soon about Landing Crossing. There's also the whole if you're just discovering the Beyond the White Book channel slash the How and Why of It videos, I have plenty of videos that are talking about the current competitive metagame. But this is not that video. This video instead is for new players who are interested in getting into Game of Thrones as a competitive card game. With the death of Android Netrunner, RIP, we are hopefully maybe getting an influx of new players. The IP is again as hot as it always has been. You know, with the steam picking up for that final season. Will Dany die? Will Jon die a second time? Who knows? More and more people hopefully will become interested in this game, which I believe is absolutely lovely and has one of the best communities in the world. So, and in particular, I think the best way to play this game is as a competitive card game. I've been playing this as a competitive card game for 5 years now. And it literally saved my life. And through the competitive scene, I have made the best friends that I have made as an adult. And I also get a huge sense of satisfaction about the time and effort and all those things I put into it. And I want more and more people to compete with me and to just see how awesome this game is to play as a competitive but still fun experience. So what's going to go on in this video? Well, first I'm going to go through sort of the structure of how competitive play works in Game of Thrones, the card game, and to a lesser extent FFG. So if you're coming from Android Netrunner, you might be a little bit more familiar with this first part of the video where we talk about sort of what a store championship is, what a regional is, and things like that. But then the second half of the video, or the second two-thirds or so, the final two-thirds, there we go, of the video will be going over a deck. A deck that's built entirely out of core set cards. And why would I do this? Well, first, I believe that you should, if you're a competitive player, the first thing you should do is buy 3 core sets. One, it gives you the largest card pool for your money. You can build multiple decks. So you can build multiple decks for yourself, to play against yourself or play with friends, and it just gives you a lot of deck building flexibility right away. So 3 core sets is where to go. But that's a lot of money. That's probably, what, $90 to $100? I don't know in a while. I haven't bought 3 core sets in a while because I've been playing since 2nd edition began. But it's the best place to start if you're going to be a competitive player, because from there you can just build and branch out your collection with whatever themes interest you. Right? And so what I've wanted to do was find a deck then that is competitive from just the core set. And I think I found one. We'll get to it at the end of towards the end of the episode. And I'm going to go over it card by card, how it works, what it does, what are the synergies, and it's going to be very full Professor Roy mode, where we're going to go through it, we're going to talk about the plots, we're going to talk about the cards, how they interact, and then once you built this deck, and it's a Targ deck, spoiler alert, also the great thing about it is it's easy to slot in replacement cards as your card pool grows. Because the great thing about Targaryen, well, the great thing about Targaryen as a new player is Targ has expanded its card pool very linearly, where in the sense of like you can easily just slide cards out as you get more cards because it's just straight up power creep rather than expanding sort of horizontally, where there's a lot of new and interesting themes. There's just straight up power creep for a lot of Targ cards. So you're just like, oh, this 2-drop is so much better than the 2-drop that comes in the core set. Those cards are out, boom, this 2-drop's in there. And things like that. So we're going to go over that. So, but before I get started even for that, I want to recommend a couple of starting resources that you should probably take a look at before you even watch this video. The first is a White Book episode that I did at the very beginning of 2nd edition with Will Lentz and Aaron Glazer, episode 222, and I'm going to link it down here. It goes over a lot of the basics of how the game works, the terminology, how plots work, what are some good starting plots, and we build a couple of decks, I think, on that episode. It's been a while. I mean, it's been like 3 years since we did it, but I've constantly recommended it, and new players who get it recommended them constantly say yes, it's a good episode. So you should definitely check out White Book episode 222. It will be linked down there. The next thing is my friend, and hopefully soon to be yours, Chris Thompson recently did a buying guide for for expanding your collection. So once you bought 3 core sets, he even did like fancy little charts because we're in the data visualization age. So he did fancy little charts that make it easy to follow along of what you should do to expand your collection. So you should take a look at that as well. So if you take my advice and you buy 3 core sets, which you should do if you want to be a competitive player, the next step is to go to Chris's document and take a look, and it will show you, oh, I like this Targ deck. Well, you can see how to get the Targ cards. Oh, okay, I've learned Targ, and I've been playing around with these Lannister cards. Here's Lannister, things like that. So CT did a really good job laying that out, and it's one of the most impressive pieces of Thrones writing that we've had in a long while. So those are the 2 resources I would recommend. So pause the video, go listen to Aaron, Will, and I talk about new player concepts like what is tempo in Game of Thrones, what is card advantage in Game of Thrones. These are really useful if you're coming from other card games like Android Netrunner, you're coming from Magic, and things like that. So then go look at CT's buying guide, and you're good. All right, so you went and did that. Okay, cool. We're now back here. All right, so a couple of things to understand about competitive Game of Thrones. So rounds are 55 minutes, and it's best of 1. So that's probably the biggest thing if you're coming from like Magic or Yu-Gi-Oh or Pokemon or other games like that, or to a lesser extent Hearthstone. Hearthstone doesn't quite have that, but anyway. I'm getting on another game. But anyway, if you're coming from another competitive card game, and same with Android or Star Wars, the LCG, where you had 2 factions, you would switch back, so you'd be playing multiple games. That's like each round you're only playing 1 game. That's really important to understand. It's also really important to understand that it creates probably more competitive variance than other card games, particularly Magic, because you're only playing 1 game. And if your deck takes a dump on itself, it's you don't get that second game or that third game to your deck to do what it's supposed to do. So that's in many ways competitive decks in Thrones really do need to be streamlined because there's no room for error in rounds and pairings and things like that. So 55-minute rounds, best of 1 out of 1, and that's how the structure of a tournament works. Now, FFG OP is structured as a pyramid, which is right here on your screen. No? Yeah, right here on your screen now. Okay, cool. So the bottom is the store championships. So store championships, there's a lot of them. Any game store can basically apply for them. There's usually, in most areas that like sizable areas or regions, you can find like 4 to 6 of them. My very first season playing competitively, I went to like 9 or 10, and I was willing to travel, of course. But this year, I attended like 4, I think. I won't bore you with those. But anyway, I attended about 4, and that's really low for me. I wasn't able to travel as much as I wanted to start championships just because of the way things lined up with work and things. But you can usually attend at least 2 to 4, you would say. And it's the baseline lowest level of OP. It's, they call it, I think, the casual tier officially. But what it basically means is this is the grist for your average Game of Thrones competitive player. Winning a store championship should be your first goal as a competitive player. And there's going to be tons of them. The stakes are pretty low. They usually tend to be relatively small unless it's in like a really concentrated community. Like Ohio has a huge number of players, so their store championships tend to be a little bigger. Same with like Chicago or the greater New York City area, where we usually have like 10 to 12 people for a store championship, which is generally tend to be bigger. So it tends to be smaller. It tends to be, or California, of course, they have big store championships. It tends to be smaller, tends to be more intimate, and any store can have it. So you don't need to, you can go up to your local game store and be like, look, could you put in for a store championship this year? And oftentimes they will, particularly if you can say, hey, look, I can help you make the money back on the kit. So that's the lowest level, and that should be your first goal. My first goal as a competitive player was to win a store championship. When I finally won my first store championship last year, and again, that was after 2 years of playing Game of Thrones, both in first edition and second edition, I was unbelievably excited. And it's a huge accomplishment to finally win your first store championship. So if you're getting started, that should be your goal, is to win the store championship. Baseline. Now, store championships, there's cool prizes, usually like play mats for the top 4, deck boxes, like these. Hey, oh, this is an old one from first edition, but anyway, deck boxes, things like that, and play mats and stuff like that. And the cool, and all the cool thing about FFG OP is all their events come with alternate art cards. So you can, and it's usually the Star Championship ones are usually pretty good. This year, I think it was the Night of Flowers, the one which was with really cool art. And the thing that's great about them is the official FFG arts have awesome art. Okay, so that's the Store Championship baseline level. The next level is regional. Oh, one more thing, sorry. Store Championships in Game of Thrones now run from about November to about March, and that's sort of season 1. And the other thing to remember about, if you're trying to get into the competitive scene, like Store Championships are also like, the meta is sort of, the meta for that year is sort of just beginning to find itself out. So there's like a lot of room for experimentation this Store Championship season, because the players are much more willing to take risks because there's so many Store Championships. Your average competitive player probably attends about three to five. And so, if you don't have to necessarily play that one deck that you think is the best deck in the meta. You might be like, oh, I think this is pretty good. I'll take it to this Store Championship and see how it does. It's a great opportunity to test out your brews in the wild. So you're often going to play against some more unpredictable things in the Store Championship. Anyway, so that runs from about November, right after the World Championship, to about March. So that's the first part of the competitive season. The next is the regional championships. Okay, we are in regional season right now. Regional season is probably the highest competitive level that your average Game of Thrones player gets to. Regionals are a tier above Store Championships, obviously. See the pyramid? Anyway. And they tend to be about 3 or 4 of them per region. And like they used to be that the regions were a lot clearer. Like there was like a New England Mid-Atlantic region, or no, and then there was like a Southern region. But everybody doesn't really do that anymore. It's kind of unclear who and what gets regionals. But usually most regions have somewhere around 4 regionals. In my area this year, there's a regional in Massachusetts, a regional in Connecticut, a regional in Philadelphia, and a regional in New York City. That's 4. Then just below us, there's also one nearby in Virginia. So there's like 5. Then that is within, like, if you are based in New York or Philadelphia, like I am, that is a reasonable drive for you. New England had 2. And down in New York, so that's like 3. So you could probably predict that there'd be about, and there's also Rochester. I forgot about that. So there's a whole other one, right? Because I wasn't able to make it to Rochester this year. But anyway, so there's a bunch of them up here in the Northeast. California has a bunch, and the Midwest has a bunch. I think the Midwest has 4 or 5 this year, right? Usually the coasts, the Midwest and California have the most, but most regions you can attend about 2. I would say there's probably about 2 that are within driving distance of most places. So because regionals there's fewer of them, these are more competitive experiences. This is where you start seeing a really defined metagame. And by metagame, I mean, for those of you who have no card game experience, which is a set of decks that are balanced and play against each other. So there are some decks that are good in the metagame, and there are some decks that are bad in the metagame. And the way figuring out where the deck you want to play fits in the metagame is one of the most important skills. Like, it's a long-term skill that you're going to need to develop as a competitive player, and one I hope to do a future video on, maybe with a guest, like sort of talking about how to read a metagame. But anyway, that's not the point of this video. But it's where you start seeing a more established metagame, where you start seeing the sort of best decks that you'll hear from content creators like myself, The White Book, Wars to Come, Rob's channel, Banter, all these different content creators. You'll start hearing, they talk about Lanny Reigns. Well, you're going to start seeing these archetypes and decks in that. You won't necessarily see them in Star Championships because, again, there's more room for experimentation because there's so many of them. The most competitive players are willing to test out brews. But at regionals level, people are much less willing to take risks, because for your medium player, like, the most competitive experience that they're going to have in a year is a regional, because they won't necessarily be able to travel for nationals, continentals, which is not on the pyramid, but we'll talk about them in a second, and worlds. If you are just getting into the game, go to a regional now, and bring the deck that I'm recommending here. If you only have 3 core sets, bring the deck. Why go to a regional if you're not fully prepared? One, you want the competitive experience. Even if you're not playing the ideal tuned deck, the competitive experience of getting a feel of what a full 5 to 8 round Game of Thrones tournament is like, and it's a very intense marathon, is a huge thing to start building your competitive pedigree. Secondly, you get to meet people. Like, meeting people is the best part of this game. One, on a social level. Like, again, the best friends I've made as an adult are from Game of Thrones, the card game. You know, and my friends, my longer term friends before that, they're like, "Are you in this like weird cult? What, Game of Thrones? You always talk about thrones." Yeah. So I have tons of friends. It's a huge, awesome social experience. There's awesome after parties if you're traveling really out of town. But lots of regionals, you can just do a day trip and have dinner with the fellow players. But meeting people, besides just the social satisfaction you get, and that's a huge thing, is also a huge competitive boon. Because by meeting people, you make friends, you make allies, or enemies. But let's talk about making the allies here. So you make friends, and this is going to, one, give you people that you can play against online, people who are going to be willing to lend you cards. And that was a huge, crucial moment for me when I was becoming a competitive player, was once I befriended the other New York City people. They were willing to lend me cards, lend me decks. Like, my mentor in Game of Thrones, Dan Struhal, would lend me cards, lend me decks, same with Dave Stromes and other people, to just learn how to play. They'd be like, "Hey, look, this is the deck I'm working on. You should take a look, play it against me. All right, I'll play the deck that you brought. Now you play it against my tuned deck." These kind of things. It's somebody to play with, either online or in person, or they'll lend you cards. So they'll be like, "Okay, you came to this regional, you played this Targ deck that I recommended, that's just core set only." They're like, "Okay, cool. Well, what deck would you like to play? Well, if you come to the next regional that we're having in a couple of weeks, I'll build that deck for you out of my cards, and you can play it." Like, that's the thing. Like, I do that for new players, and I do that for medium players, and I do it for Aaron Glazer, who's been playing longer than me, and is one of the biggest things. I built all his decks. I built Dark Nodge. These are big deal people communities decks, right? Like, people in this community are really generous. And so if you come to a regional, you make friends with people, you're like, "Hey, look, I want to get into playing this game competitively. Would you be willing to lend me cards? I'm interested in playing this, I played this Targ deck that Roy recommended on his awesome video. And could you lend me a Targ Wars deck that's the next level above this?" And they'll be like, "Yeah, of course," unless their plan is to play Targ. So they'll be like, "No, you should instead try this Tyrell deck," or whatever. And just talking about the game with people is really fun, and it's a great way to learn. So having friends, befriending people in the game, making those friends, and then learning the game through the experience of playing with them, is going to make you a better competitive player. Plus, it encourages you to go to more regionals, because as soon as there's some friendly faces, that makes it easier. It's icebreak. So you met this person at the regional, then you go to another regional, and you meet, and they introduce you to their friends, and it just sort of spirals and spirals, and before you know it, you're embedded in this wonderfully intertwined worldwide community that we have. So that's regional. So if you are watching this video, you're a brand new person interested in joining the competitive scene, you should go to a regional. And you should if you just have 3 core sets, you should take the deck that I'm recommending today. All right? So that's the second level of how organized play works. There's a third level, and that's national championships. Okay? So national championships are a more elite level. Now, the thing that separates FFG OP from Magic OP, Pokemon OP, Hearthstone OP is they're all basically open tournaments. They're all now each level below offers a bye. So if you win a Star Championship, you get a bye to a regional. If you win a regional, you get a bye to nationals, and if you win nationals, you get a bye to worlds. So you get a benefit for winning these tournaments, but they're not closed. As long as there's space. And Worlds is a little funky about this, but as long as there's space, you can just show up. They're basically Magic Grand Prix, I guess you could say. Like, Nationals is just a Grand Prix. If you can find yourself, this year it's in Springfield, Missouri, being hosted by my friend and fellow White Book co-host Will Lenz. You can if you can put your ass in Springfield, you're there. You don't have to qualify. You don't have to go through all these steps. They're all basically huge open tournaments. Same with Gen Con. If you can get a ticket, and there's still tickets available now, you should definitely go. And we'll get to Gen Con in a second. Same is true for Euros. You just show up, you pay your entry fee, and you're playing. Same with nationals. But of course, there's only one national championship in the United States. There's only one national championship in the UK, blah, blah, blah. These are, of course, very prestigious. People compete very highly for this. This is where you see the highest level of play, short of maybe Worlds or Continentals, which we'll get to. Nationals is, of course, whoever wins is a national champion. And we have some really awesome national champions here in the U.S. We had Nate Tarantelli won the first one. Great guy. Seth Lowe, longtime community member, finally won a national championship last year. Great story. Then he dropped and played Magic. And we're looking to see who we're going to crown next year for U.S. national champions. Actually, Nationals is new to FFG. It's only existed in Game of Thrones since 2nd edition. And it's a great experience to go and do. So, but it's the second highest level. Well, third highest, I guess. Second highest, whatever. It's above regionals. If you win a regional, you get a bye to U.S. Nationals, but no flights. You only get a flight to Worlds if you win a national or continental. Now, there is a level missing here from this pyramid. It is Continentals. So Continentals is the best, I think, experience for your continent. Spoiler alerts. Why? Well, look, Euros recently happened when I was recording this video. It happened about 2 weeks ago. And it was the largest Thrones tournament, perhaps, this year. But there's another event called Stolic, which is a whole other thing that is outside the scope of this video. But in Europe, they play in a castle. It's every year the biggest Game of Thrones. Huge thing. If you're a European, you should absolutely attend it. But as someone who's an American who can't afford to fly to Germany, it's outside the scope of this video. But Stolic's like kind of above all this pyramid. Anyway, so Continentals. Continentals for North America is hosted at Gen Con. It was hosted in the UK, in Europe for the last 2 years. They're moving to a continental European location. They're Brexiting Continentals from the UK to a continental location next year. It's at Gen Con this year. Gen Con is the spiritual home of Thrones in the United States. If you can make it to Gen Con, you should go. As much of a regional. So even if you're a very inexperienced player, even if you're a new player, you should go to Gen Con and play. 1, you will get a big, huge competitive experience. 2, you go to Gen Con. So you spend 1 day playing Game of Thrones, maybe 2 if you make the second day. And you get to go to Gen Con and do awesome Gen Con things. You can do a beta draft qualifier for Magic. You can see all the awesome new games. You can go see just Gen Con is amazing as an experience of itself. 3, there's an awesome Thrones after party hosted by the White Book and Second Sons every year that is just an amazing blowout. That is some of my favorite experiences of my life, of the last 3 Gen Cons that I went to. So you get the whole social and competitive experience by going to Gen Con, plus you get all the cool shit that Gen Con has on top of it. So if you can afford to go to Gen Con, you should definitely go. And it was originally the site of the World Championships for Game of Thrones. It's probably, besides Worlds, the most competitive event. People really want to win Gen Con. And of course, past Gen Con winners are huge members of the community. My fellow Second Sons co-host, Chris Schoenthal, Wars to Come founder Alex Black. Those are the 2 2.0 winners of Continentals. Patrick Reynolds, the robot, who won my first year that I went to Gen Con, the last year of 1.0. There's just like a huge number. Steve Simone, a huge character in the community. These are all people who have won Gen Con. Gen Con is a huge deal in North America. And it's usually the largest tournament in North America. And so it's a huge experience to just meet people, meet personalities, meet content creators, but just make friends. So if you can afford to go to Gen Con, you should definitely go. All right, but it's not on the pyramid for some reason. I don't know, so I kind of added it. Anyway, you should go. If you're a European, go to Euros if you can afford it. And, of course, Stolic. You should go to Stolic, too. All right, the World Championship. The World Championship is the highest level of competitive Thrones. It awards... Oh, and if you win Gen Con, you get a flight to Worlds. So that's and a hotel room, I believe. So all good stuff. So if you win Nationals or you win Continentals, you get a first-round bye at Worlds and a flight. Fun stuff. So Worlds is an open tournament. If you can afford to go to Minneapolis in November, you can go. I've done it twice. Both times have been great experiences. If you're North American, it's one of the few times that you can affordably meet a large number of Europeans because all the European national champions come, and the European champion comes as well. It's a huge high level of competition. Lots of good give and take between the Europeans and the Americans. There's a somewhat serious rivalry between the two where we seem to trade off. Americans win Worlds one year, Europeans win the next, and things like that. So there's lots of really just fun dynamic. Great time to meet a huge number of content creators from across the pond, personalities in the Facebook group, all these kind of things. And it's an extremely friendly group of people. There's a bar within walking distance of the game center that people go to and just party hardy. It's just, again, like 3 days of 2 to 3 days of nonstop partying and playing games. And plus, if you play another one of the FFG games, you can also do that. So Worlds is an open tournament. If you can get a ticket, and they do a weird lottery system, although without Netrunner this year, who knows if they'll still do a lottery system. But anyway, there's a lottery system. If you get a ticket, though, you can play at Worlds. But it's the highest level of competitive play, and it awards a card design. If you win Worlds, your face will be on a card, and you get to design or design a card and leave a lasting impact on the game. So that's the highest level. So why did I just bore you to death by going through all this? Because I think, to me, a lot of what makes this system cool is the aspirational quality of it, right? Like, when I was getting in, just like learning about this, listening to the stories of the people in New York about their experiences at Gen Con. Like, the reason I went was because the ways in which my friends that I made in the New York City community were talking about Gen Con. You know, at Gen Con 2013, this happened. At Gen Con, there's all these stories. We're a story-rich community because this game has gone through 3 iterations: a collectible card game, the first edition of the LCG, and the second edition of the LCG. And there's a huge number of stories, huge number of people just with all this depth of knowledge and things like that. And it was so aspirational. It's like, oh, I want to have these experiences too. I want to be able to say it, to be able to do it. So I want to give you a sense of how this works, to give you an aspiration. So you're an interested competitive player. You should aspire to be part of this pyramid. Start with Star Championships and Regional Championships, and then if the money lines up, you should definitely try to attend Nationals, which will be a great experience, Gen Con, which is going to be an amazing experience, or Worlds. They're all really worth your time and worth your effort if you want to play this game competitively. And with each one of these rising up the pyramids, you get a level of more competitiveness. Now, that's how the OP structure works. So let's click all of this away. So what's the step? Okay, all right, Roy. I actually just sat through all that boringness of you talking about OP pyramid, rambling about all these different levels of events. Okay. Brass tacks time. What do I do if I want to get in the game as a competitive player from a gameplay experience? Okay, so again, if you've bought 3 core sets, I would recommend that you play this deck right... Oh, oops, I need to switch. I was trying to turn my notifications off. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so this deck right here, okay? Because this is a Targaryen deck. See, Targ, interestingly enough, from its card pool, probably of all the factions, plays the most core set cards of any other faction. Now, there's a lot of really powerful Targ cards that you could find in the chapter packs, but I think that core set cards are still really powerful. And you can take this to a store championship or a regional, more importantly, and do well. Now, no, I don't want anyone to go to a regional and be like, Roy said I would win a regional if I played this deck. No. But what this does do is it does give you a baseline. It gives you a deck that you will go 3-3 or 3-2 or 2-3, or maybe, you know, in a smaller regional, you could go, you know, you could make the top 8 with this or the top 4 because it's a strong deck. Now, also playing it will teach you a lot about how to play the game competitively. So you can assemble this deck right away from just the core sets, and it's ready to go. So if you were like, okay, Netrunner's dead, I got 3 core sets, I'm going to play this game competitively. Just assemble it, sleeve this deck up, and go to a regional, and you will be okay. And there's no promises that you're going to blow the socks off of people, but you'll be able to have a fun day and you'll have real games. Because this deck, its power level is lower than a lot of decks in the broader metagame, but it's not so low that you'll just get blown out in every single game. And it also gives you a clear starting point that as you buy more cards, you will easily see where to slot in. And at the very end, I'm going to show off a deck that's kind of like an accelerated version of this, that what a Targ deck looks like when it has the full card pool and how many cards it has in common, right? It's a lot. And the strategies are relatively similar. So the other thing is, when I was getting into the game, I suffered from this problem where like I would build these decks myself and they just were not good because my card pool was all wonky. You know, I bought 2 core sets and then I bought like, ooh, I love Stark. I'm going to buy the Stark box. I hate Lannister. I'm not buying the Lannister box. Huge mistake in first edition. And all these kind of different things. So I just didn't have a deck that could keep up, compete, or even like win games playing semi-casually at game night kits or on weekly meetups. But this deck will allow you to win games in these semi-competitive environments that you can practice your skills, again, from your card pool. So this gives you a deck that you can just take to just about any Thrones event from this small card pool and do fine. And that's, I think, really important. It's something that I missed when I was a new player, and I wish I had had it because I think it would have sped up my learning the game. And yeah, it's a great learner deck. So I'm going to go over sort of how this deck works, read each card, talk about how it works, and to give new players a sense of sort of the basic Targ card pool. And then I will end talking a little bit about what Targ looks like once you have a full card pool, and then I'll end the video with a few more recommendations of resources to take a look at once you've sort of listened to this video or watched and listened. I don't know. Watched and listened to this video and where to go from there. All right. So let's get started. All right. Where I think you should start is with plots, because plots are what separates Game of Thrones from every other card game. It's the single most unique mechanic. All right, and then plots also sort of give you a sense of like what your deck's possibilities are. So the first thing about Targ is you have this Targ deck is you have access to fealty. We're going to start with actually the agenda, excuse me. So how the agenda works. So the agenda is you cannot include more than 15 neutral cards in your deck. New faction card to reduce the cost of the next loyal card you marshal or play this phase by 1. Now, marshaling and playing are 2 separate things in Game of Thrones card game. Marshaling is what you do to characters and locations. What you play events. Okay, so that means that all of your events that we'll get to can be reduced by 1 by you kneeling your faction card. Or if you need to play characters, you can kneel it to play these expensive loyal characters that the deck has. So your agenda gives you a lot of flexibility to improve your economy. Because one of the problems with just the pure core set is your economy can be a little awkward, particularly with Targaryen, where you're running some big, powerful, expensive characters. And this helps you, but it also helps you because you can surprise people with events. And we'll get to that play pattern in a little bit when we get to events. All right, so that's the agenda. Plots, though. All right, so plots. The first plot that we have is a noble cause. And this has 5 income, 0 initiative, 1 claim, reserve 6. So that means your max hand size is 6. It's noble, Kingdom Noble. Reduce the cost of the first Lord or Lady character you marshal this round by 2. This is one of your 2 or 3 econ plots. Now, econ plots are extremely important in 2nd edition because the economy in this game doesn't necessarily scale linearly like Magic. Land drop, Hearthstone, you gain 1 mana, etc., etc., etc. There's economy cards, and we'll get to them in a little bit. But you don't necessarily need these cards. Most of your economy is going to come from plots. And Noble Cause allows you to play all of the expensive lords, and you're running, I believe, 3 expensive lords here, or ladies, excuse me. 4 technically with Viserys. And this is good. Now, the weakness of a Noble Cause, well, first off, those benefits of Noble Cause. 5 gold, so you could, with that 2 reduction, so that's up to 7 resources, up to 8 resources if you have fealty unknelt. And oftentimes you can play an expensive bomb like Khal Drogo, who we'll get to in a bit, alongside a cheap character, giving you big explosive economy. The weaknesses of this plot is it has the kingdom trait. which means that this is something you need to keep in mind. There's a plot called naval superiority. And what naval superiority does is it reduces the income on your plot card to 0. All right, to 0. And that is a huge blowout play. Now, you don't see naval a lot in competitive play right now, but it's always something to worry about. You're seeing it more with some cards that have come out recently that I won't really go into here, but it's definitely something that you should always think about, particularly for your opener. Because your opener in plot is probably the single most important plot when you're getting started, because it allows you to establish the tempo, the speed of the game, where your resources are right from the start. So your opening plot is really important. So Noble Cause is a risky opener because of that Kingdom trait. So while it's a really strong econ card, particularly in this deck, which is running so many bomb lords and ladies, it's still pretty dangerous. And I would not recommend opening with this plot right away. And we'll get to a card I would recommend opening with later. But this is really good Noble Cause, like turn 2, turn 3, as you're building up your tempo, as you're building up your board, and you need to sort of slam that bomb character, that Daenerys, that Khal Drogo, that will close the game out for you. All right. So, building orders. So, building orders is here for consistency, to make sure that you hit your economy, and you hit the location plaza punishment, which we'll get to in a bit, which will help you with the tempo of the game. Building orders is 4 gold, 1 initiative, 1 claim, reserve 7, so high hand size. When revealed, search the top 10 cards of your deck for an attachment or location, reveal it, and add it to your hand, shuffle your deck. Now, this lets you fetch economy cards and lets you fetch the Plaza of Punishment, which we'll get to again. And it's just generally pretty good. Its income is solid at 4. Its initiative is okay to bad at 1. But it's just generally there for consistency, because since you're running with just a core set, you don't have access to the huge span of resource plots, the better economy cards that you get in cycles. So you need to make sure that you're consistently hitting limited locations or pulling your important Plaza of Punishment every turn. Or not every turn, but consistently. So Building Orders is really here to just make the deck more consistent and even things out. The next plot is Calling the Banners, which is 3 income, 6 initiative, 1 claim, reserve 6. When revealed, choose an opponent, gain 1 gold for each character that player controls. This is another econ card. It is really good when your opponent is ahead, or against decks that are really about going wide. And it's also really good if you need to go first, because that 6 initiative is very difficult for decks to beat. Even, there's been some creep about initiative as the card pool expanded, but still 6 is still really solid. And so it's useful against factions, particularly like Martell, that are all about setting the agenda of the turn by making themselves first or making you first, depending on their needs. And you can just get you a lot of gold. And you do need a lot of gold when you're running just a core set deck. So again, this deck has a lot of this card has a lot of upside. Its downside is, of course, it's really bad if your opponent doesn't have very many characters, if you're blowing them out, if there's been a reset that clears the board, you're in trouble with Calling the Banners. But you have the option. Again, the great thing about plots is you don't have to flip them, well, at least not right away, and you get to choose when to use them. And so Calling the Banners is really good when you are at parity with your opponent, or they're slightly ahead in character count. And you just need to sort of play some cards and decide the tempo of the turn by choosing who gets to go first. Calm over Westeros. This is a 5 income, 3 initiative, 1 claim, 6 reserve plot. It has the ability, when revealed, name a challenge type until you reveal a new plot card. Reduce the claim value on the attacking player's revealed plot card by 1 during challenges of that type in which you are the defending player. Okay, so Calm over Westeros is... I was not a fan of this plot. I think actually in the episode I recommend, the 222 episode of the White Book that I recommend you listen to, I think I'm down on this plot. Well, it's been 4 years since that's happened, and Calm over Westeros is a damn good plot. Why is it a damn good plot? First off, that 5 gold is really good. It's again equal to what Noble Cause has without that 2 reduction. but it only has the summer trait. And the summer trait is really good because it doesn't get hit by naval superiority. So just then, it has 5 gold, really good as an opener. In fact, you should probably open with this. 3 initiative is solid. It's particularly solid against other frequent opening plots. Like, let's look at here. It's better than Noble Cause. It's better than Building Orders. It's better than cards we're going to get to. It's equal to Counting Coppers. And it's better than Summons, lower than March to the Wall. So it has solid initiative, solid claim, and then it has this name a challenge type. When revealed, or until you reveal a new plot card, reduce the claim value on the attacking player's reveal plot card by 1 during challenge of that type. So this means that if you have an awkward setup, and we'll get to setup in a little bit, this card will help protect you. It can say, look, no military claim. That's huge. No intrigue claim if you need to defend your hand. So you have a solid board, but no intrigue icons. You're like, okay, intrigue. They can't take any cards out of your hand that turn. It really is just good at stopping you from getting blown out on the first turn. And as a new player, that's really important because you're still learning the game. You're still trying to figure out the proper sequencing. You're still trying to figure out how to manage a board state. Combo Westeros gives you a little bit of a breather turn. Okay, I don't have to. This turn I can just sort of spend catching up. I don't have to defend that military challenge. All those kind of things. Really good plot. You'll actually still see this in just general decks as well today. Decks with the full card pool. So it's a really great plot. And I would suggest just consistently opening with this plot. It's just a safe opener. All right, Counting Coppers. All right, this has 2 income, 3 initiative, 1 claim. I was like, initially this card actually didn't see a lot of play at the very, very beginning in just the core set because of that 2 income. But over time we've learned that 2 income's not that big of a deal. 3 initiative is pretty good. But drawing 3 cards is just busted in 2nd edition, even just out of the core set. The ability to, after your opponent puts a lot of pressure on you, to just refill is a huge deal. It's so powerful. If you have a really bad, you drew junk in your first couple of turns, Counting Coppers means you're going to see 5 cards that turn. The 3 from the plot and your 2 natural draw. Huge, huge and important card. Just get used to this card. Your opponent's going to play it against you a lot, and as you play more competitive thrones, you're going to be playing Counting Coppers a lot. 3 cards is really good. All right, bottom line, new players, 3 cards is really good. This plot is good. This is a good middle of the game plot. So if Calm Over Westeros is a great opener, Noble Cause and building and calling the banners is good for maintaining or catching up in tempo. I'd say calling the banners is really good at catching up when your opponent's ahead in tempo. They have more initiative, they have more action, they have more characters. You play Calling the Banners, that gives you a bunch of money, you can catch up with them. Noble Cause, pretty good for, okay, I'm set up, boom, I need the Khal Drogo, I need the Dany, boom, they're in play. Counting Coppers is good in the middle of the game to, all right, I'm out of options. I've got, my Dany got killed. I need to see Khal Drogo, or vice versa. Khal Drogo got killed. I need to see Dany. I need to see 5 cards. Now, you might not be able to play a lot, but you'll be ready to go for the next turn after that. It's also really good for digging for your events, because even if you don't play any characters that turn, this is enough gold for you to play your events, and that's really useful. Not so good as an opener in this deck because you don't have a lot of early economy cards, but you could open with it as well if your just hand is garbage. All right, March to the Wall. This is 4 initiative, 8 initiative, 4 income, 1 claim, 5 reserve. When revealed, each player edict. When revealed, each player choose a character he or she controls if able, and discards it from play. Cannot be saved. Okay. March to the Wall is here for a lot of reasons. First, you have a lot of kill events or kill spells, if you want to be cute. And whittling your opponent down to 1 character and then playing March to the Wall is often a blowout. It often means the end of the game for them. Yeah, very, very strong. That's actually, in many ways, the goal of Targaryen in this build. Is just pressure your opponent until they're down to 2 good characters maybe. Well, if you play March to the Wall, one of those good characters is now out of their discard pile and no longer a threat, and now you're only going to deal with one of their threats. Very, very powerful. Lots of the cards in this deck are set up to synergize with March to the Wall, to put that pressure on your opponent to clear their board. This deck is not running Wildfire Assault, the other core set reset card that it's 4 gold, 7 initiative, 1 claim, I think 6 reserve. And each player chooses 3 characters and then kills the rest. It's not running that. It's relying on the kill events that we'll get to. Excuse me. It's relying on the kill events to really put the pressure on your opponent where they're forced to not be able to play around your March anymore. March is also good at keeping your opponent honest. And that means if they set up a single good character, they set up Balon, they set up Rob, just these characters. Opponent just sets up their Daenerys. You march that character away. Boom. It keeps them honest. And March is also that keeping them honest is something you also always need to play around. You need to always think about this card. You never want to be in a situation where you just have Dany in play or just have Khal Drogo in play, because that just means your opponent is going to march the shit out of you and you are out of luck. The final plot here is summons. You're running some, which is a 4/0 1 claim 7 reserve. When revealed, search the top 10 cards of your deck for a character, reveal it, and add it to your hand. Shuffle your deck. All right. You're running a lot of high impact characters: Dany, Khal Drogo, Littlefinger, Magister Illyrio, Viserys for attachment control. You're running these. You want to see these characters. This card helps you. You look at the top 10 cards of your deck. You pull the best character. You play it. Summons can sometimes be a good opener. It's got the Kingdom trait, so it's vulnerable to that naval superiority play I was talking about earlier when Noble Cause. I don't like it as an opener. This isn't a combo deck. It loves seeing Dany early. It loves seeing Khal Drogo early. But you'd rather set those cards up or set your board up and then play summons. Because, again, it only has 4 income. And unless you've already set up other in-play income cards, you're not going to be able to play your Daenerys. You're not going to be able to play your Khal Drogo. So these are the plots. It's mostly focused. These plots are mostly focused on consistency. So you have 1, 2, 3 good econ plots. You have 1, 2 3 cards really that are focused on card advantage and consistency, and a march to the wall to keep your opponent honest and to give you some options to clear their board. All right, so that's the plots. Let's go on to the characters. All right, Braided Warrior. This one's easy. This is just a chud. You're playing with just the core set. You don't have a huge amount of options for characters as a mono Targaryen deck. So Braided Warriors is a 2-cost, 3 strength, Dothraki, no attachment weapon. Not much to say about this card. This is, now, what separates Game of Thrones, because of the concept of military claim, Game of Thrones, there's chud, right? All card games have sort of chuddy characters, you know, that are just designed to be played early or things like that. But because if you lose a military challenge, you have to choose and kill a character, and with effects like March to the Wall, you just need filler characters that can fill up the board and protect your Daenerys, who we'll get to in a second, your Khal Drogo, from dying to military claim. So that's really the role of Braided Warrior. Braided Warrior is also at 2 cost really good on setup. So very not powerful, but very useful character, but doesn't really do much. But it's just there for that concept of military claim protection. Claim soak is the often term that people use. Claim soak. This is a claim soak character that can also early on win military challenges. 3 strength is pretty good. Now, the heart of your deck, and another reason why to recommend Targaryen to new players is Targaryen as a faction is very thematic. It focuses very much on Dany, particularly out of the core set. So you love Dany, and look, Dany's one of my favorite characters in the book, and kind of on the show. I love playing with Dany. And this card right here is in many ways one of the 2 hearts of your deck. The whole point of playing your deck is Daenerys. She is a loyal, so she can be reduced by your fealty character. 7 cost, 5 strength, intrigue power icon. She's lady, so she gets reduced by noble cause. Stormborn, we'll get to the importance of the Stormborn trait in just a moment. And she has insight. Now, insight is one of the keywords in this game. Now, out of the core set, keywords all have something to do with challenges. They are not like magic keywords until later expansions. They only interact with the challenges. So you have to usually win a challenge for... Well, that's not true. Ambush. Well, ambush is in the challenges phase. But all but ambush of the core set keywords interact with the challenges phase. It's the last step in resolving a challenge. Now, because the way challenges work is the duck or fuck system. I prefer fuck, but some people prefer duck. Duck's more family friendly. Anyway, the first step is determine or figure out the winner, and at that point you react to anything that happens. So, for example, we'll cut to the chase here with Tears of Bliss, this event. After you win an intrigue challenge, and we'll talk more about this, as the attacking player. So this happens at that first step. We've determined the winner. You're the winner. You can play Tears of Bliss. The next step is you award yourself unopposed. If you're unopposed challenge, this is just kind of mechanically, you get unopposed power, you don't get unopposed power. There's not a lot that interacts with that. There's, I think, exactly one card that interacts with that phase of challenges. And then the third phase is claim. So if you kill a character, discard a card, or lose a power, and gain a power if you're the winner. For that. And then the final word is K. So determine the winner or figure out the winner. Unopposed. Claim. And keywords. So if you win a challenge with Dany, you get to draw a card. That's what Insight does. So long story short, that's what Insight does. So she's a card advantage engine. She's great for that. She's got 5 strength. She's going to win challenges. She also has this sweet ability. While Daenerys Targaryen is standing, each character participating on an opponent's side in a challenge against you gets -1 strength. This can be nightmarish. Nightmarish for your opponent. Because we'll get to these different effects that you have where your opponent's characters will die based on their strength, and just, you know, it just means that a character that has 1 strength can't participate. Well, they can participate in the challenge, but they don't do anything. It turns their 5 strength characters into 4 strength characters, and making it easier for you to win challenges on the defense or the offense. Just, this is one of the most, it's still an incredibly powerful ability, even though there's a new Daenerys Targaryen that was printed that has an even more busted ability than this one. So think about that. This ability, which changes all challenges against you, in order to create another Dany that would see play, they had to print an even more busted ability. This Dany is the heart of your deck. One of the things you want to make sure that you do is protect her. If you play her, you want to make sure you have ways to prevent her from getting killed. Because since you're just playing on the core set, you don't have a lot of ways to recycle your characters. We'll get to, you have a couple, but you don't have a lot. So if something bad happens to Dany, you're out of luck and you're losing a huge engine in your deck. Because again, she wins challenges, she prevents challenges from being done against you, and she provides card advantage. Whew. She also is a Voltron. Now, Voltron is a slang term for a character that you really build around, that is a centerpiece character. And why is that? Is because, this is very thematic, her dragons synergize with her. And the first one is Drogon. You know, her mount, her dragon. Drogon is a 3-cost, non-loyal, 4-strength, military icon, dragon, and hatchling. No attachments. It's very important. No attachments is, well, it is also a keyword. But, you know, your opponent can't put negative attachments on your character, like Milk of the Poppy, which can go on Dany. That's a very common answer to Dany, is Milk of the Poppy. And of course, Milk of the Poppy is that neutral 1-cost condition attachment that treats the character's printed text box as if it was blank. Very powerful on Dany. But super important for you to know, this character, Drogon, each Stormborn character you control gains renown. So that means Dany, she doesn't lose her traits to Milk to the Poppy, so she's still Stormborn. She will still have, even if she gets milked, Drogon's renown. And renown, of course, is a keyword. It's a challenge-based keyword that only has it only happens at that final step. And if you win the challenge that Dany was participating in as the attacker or the defender, she will gain 1 power. Very strong. And again, she keeps this even if she gets blanked by Milk of the Poppy. Really powerful. Drogon is a good card. It's why you're running 3 of them. He's good at defending or pushing through military challenges, and he's also really important for the, probably, besides Daenerys and Khal Drogo, who we'll get to in just a little bit, is very important for Dracarys, which is the 3rd best card probably in your deck, and we'll get to Dracarys in a little bit. The next card is Handmaiden. This is another Claim Soak character. She's a 2-cost, 1 strength, intrigue, power, ally companion. Sacrifice Handmaiden to choose and stand a lady character. Great synergy again with Dany to get her standing so she can initiate a challenge, because remember, to initiate a challenge, all your characters kneel or tap if you want to use the magic terminology. You can sacrifice this Handmaiden, which means placing her in your from play into your discard pile. Boom, Dany stands up, so she's still in the challenge, because that's another new player competitive trick. Characters can be kneeling or standing, and they're still participating. Now, there are cards that kneel or like stand a character, remove them from the challenge, but if that's not an effect, you kneel Dany to initiate your challenge. You sacrifice the Handmaiden, she stands up. She's still in that challenge. Now, some new players that I've encountered, they think if a character's standing, they're removed, and that's not the case. So again, that means immediately Dany's ability turns right on. All right. So, Handmaiden, she's mostly a filler. She's good for that action with Khal Drogo and Dany, with Magister Illyrio, and she's also just good chud, good Claim Soak. Then we go back to one of our centerpiece characters, Khal Drogo, the mountain who rises the mountain. The son of my stars? Yes, I think that's what Dany calls him. Anyway, I should have freshened up on my Martin before doing this. Anyway, 6 cost, 5 strength, military power, Dothraki Lord Renown. Again, that keyword that you gain a power if you win a challenge in which he's participating. You may initiate, and he has this awesome ability. You may initiate an additional military challenge during the challenges phase. Super strong, unbelievably strong. This is again the 2nd best card in your deck. He can just run over people. Seeing him, so he's a card you definitely want to see early, like setting up Khal Drogo is very strong, and it's really, really strong because of that ability to initiate an additional military challenge. So if you have Khal Drogo, a Braided Warrior, and a Drogon on the first turn, that's a lot of military pressure on your opponent, and some decks running the full card pool can't stand up to that pressure coming from pure core set cards. That's one of the reasons why I recommend this deck to new players who just have the core sets, is because of the ability of Targaryen to just blow people out using Khal Drogo, and we'll get to Dracarys in a second. If you can use Khal Drogo in combination with some of your other cards that you have here, you're in good shape. All right, Littlefinger. All right, so Littlefinger. Reaction, after you marshal Littlefinger, draw 2 cards. He's a neutral 5-cost, 4 strength, intrigue, power, allied lord, small council. Very little of that matters, except lord. He does get reduced by noble cause, and he also gives you +1 income. So Littlefinger's really good on 2 axes. First, he's pretty good on setup because he gives you that +1 income. You're making more gold. Boom, awesome. He also is good because if you see him later in the game, you draw 2 cards when you play him, and it gives you a 4 strength body with intrigue icons. This deck's a little weak on intrigue icons, and to a lesser extent power icons, so he's just good space filler. And he's very solid to see basically at any point in the game. He's good to play with noble cause, so he's good early, mid, in all the quadrants. Littlefinger is pretty good. He gives you a body, he gives you cards, he gives you economy. Fantastic. All right. The next character is Magister Illyrio. He is a lord, merchant, 5-cost, 4 strength, intrigue, power, action. Pay 2 gold to choose and stand a character, limit once per phase. So, really powerful with, again, Daenerys, who you want to be standing, but also really powerful with Khal Drogo. So, Khal Drogo, 5 strength military challenge. Pay 2 gold, stand him up, 5 strength military challenge. Now, Magister Illyrio is also super important in this deck because you're just running the core set cards. You don't have a lot of redundancy. If something bad, you need, your threat density is relatively low. So you need to be able to constantly be reusing those threats. So multiple uses of Daenerys, multiple uses of Khal Drogo, all get powered by Magister Illyrio. Also, if for some reason you run into your opponent's playing cards that kneel your characters, Magister Illyrio is a great answer to that. So he's all around a strong utility character, and his ability doesn't require him to kneel or do anything else. You just pay the 2 gold, so you can still use him in challenges just fine. So really just an extremely useful card. He's one of the cards that gets power creeped out of your deck as you get more cards, but in this pure core set environment that we're building here, very good. Next is Rhaegal. All right, so Rhaegal is House Targaryen, non-loyal, 3-cost character, 3 strength, military intrigue, dragon hatchling, no attachments. Okay. Now this is what he does with Dany, and this is really strong. Again, getting to that point of standing up your Dany to get multiple uses of her to turn her ability back on when she's in a challenge. After you win a challenge in which a Stormborn character you control is participating, choose and stand a Stormborn character. Whew! Really strong. Really, really strong. And we're going to get to some interactions with Rhaegal and some cool things that you can do with him. But his ability doesn't require him to kneel. All right? So, again, he is incredibly strong. In fact, he's probably the best of the dragons because of his icon spread and strength. He's just probably the most efficient dragon because he's 3 cost, he's got 3 strength, both really good, and he has 2 icons. And 2 icons that you want, military and intrigue, plus his synergy with Dany. This is probably the best dragon. This is the dragon you want to keep around. The action economy with Dany, his own icon spread, really just fantastic. Then we get to one of the best 2-drops still down to today, another reason to play Targaryen, and a super thematic card, if there ever was one. Jorah's a really cool card, still really powerful. He still sees a ton of play in the expanded card pool. He's a non-loyal, 2-cost, 4 strength, military, intrigue icons, companion, and knight. He has renown. If Ser Jorah Mormont has 3 or more betrayal tokens on him, sacrifice him. Forced reaction. Okay, so forced reactions happen before all other reactions. So when so this takes place in well, let me read the forced reaction first. After you win a challenge in which Ser Jorah Mormont is participating, place 1 betrayal token on him. Okay, so forced reactions happen before anything else. They're triggered by the game, so it's important to remember you are responsible for remembering your own forced reactions, but your opponent is as well. So if you miss a forced reaction, a judge is going to come in and make you resolve it in most cases, unless the game state has just like so far gone beyond. But you should remember your forced reactions, and your opponent will have you remember, particularly this one, because again, Ser Jorah Mormont's really good. They're going to want him off the table. So, but forced reactions happen. So this happens in the duck step of D, or the fuck step of F, and it happens before anything else. It happens before his renown would give him additional power. It would happen before you can trigger things like, again, Tears of Lys, stuff like that. So it's the very first thing that happens at any reaction window is the forced reaction. Okay? So Jorah can never have 3 power on him from renown because as soon as he wins that 3rd challenge, he gets sacrificed and his renown goes away. That's an important thing to remember as a new player. Ser Jorah Mormont is at his best early or as a chump defender. So your opponent comes in for a intrigue challenge, you want to make sure it's not unopposed, you defend with Ser Jorah, boom, right? He can also be good to give you that extra 2 power to close. He's a very flexible card. There's lots of interesting play patterns you can have with Jorah. So very powerful card. Again, he's a 2 for 4. And so again, early with Khal Drogo, that's a lot of military pressure. So like, and it's not, you can literally set up Khal Drogo, 6 cost, because remember, setup is 8 gold, and Khal Drogo. That's a lot of military pressure. Classic Targ opener. All right. Then we have Targaryen Loyalist. This is one of the most basic cards. It's a 1 cost, 1 strength ally marshaling action. Kneel Targaryen Loyalist to reduce the cost of the next Targ character you marshal this phase by 1. This is just a baseline Chud character. It creates economy. Really great in setup. It lets you do the tall setup with Daenerys, the 7-1-0 setup, where you set up a 0-cost economy location, Daenerys at 7 gold, and the Targaryen Loyalist at 1. It's just a necessary card, particularly when you're playing the core set. You need him as military claim. You need him as economy. Good card in that sense. I mean, it's not like a great card, but it's a good card. It's useful. All right, Unsullied. All right. House Targaryen, non-loyal, cost 4, 3 strength, military power, army, no attachment except weapon. When Unsullied is attacking, each defending character gets -1 strength. Okay, Unsullied is really strong at pushing through challenges. You don't have a huge number of ways of pushing through challenges because you're running just a core set. The overall card power that you have is relatively low. But with Daenerys, good thematic synergy, Unsullied and Daenerys getting better, you can do a military challenge. So that means any defending character, when you have Daenerys out, is -2 strength. That is so huge. It opens up rooms for your Dracarys, which again we'll get to in a little bit. It opens up room for you to just win the challenge outright. It means that they're going to have to defend with this 3 strength. They're going to have to defend with multiple characters usually. And again, Thrones, unlike Magic, it's closer to Hearthstone in this way actually, is not a defensive favored game, because while you do get to choose who defends when your opponent attacks, if the attacking player has higher, they win ties. The attacking player wins ties. So your opponent has a 5 strength military icon. You're attacking with the Unsullied with Dany up. That 5 strength military icon can't win against the Unsullied because they're getting -2. And again, opens up for your Dracarys to kill that character. So Unsullied is really powerful because it allows you to push through military and power challenges, probably the 2 challenges that this deck cares about the most. And this deck, because again you're running the core set, just the core set, you don't have a huge amount of really strong bombs. Unsullied is just a great utility character to push through those challenges. Viserion, the second best dragon probably, but simply because of his stats. This is a 2 cost, 2 strength, Bicon, military, power, dragon, hatchling, no attachments. Each Stormborn character you control gains stealth. So if you get all 3 dragons out there, this means Dany gets a power every time she wins a challenge. She can stand for 1 challenge a turn, and she has stealth. And how stealth works, so stealth is one of those keywords that, besides ambush and no attachments, only works in challenges. It happens at the very beginning of a challenge. So when you declare attackers, if any of those attackers have stealth, you get to choose any one of your opponent's characters without stealth, and that character cannot defend in that challenge. This is extremely powerful. Stealth is very powerful. Now, of course, that makes Dany an excellent defender as well, because if you're playing against a faction like Greyjoy that has a lot of stealth, they can't stealth your Dany, she can defend. And then, of course, if she wins that challenge, she stands back up. Really useful. Viserion is good. It's probably, though, the weakest of the 3 add-ons to Dany. The stealth's great. Maybe Ed and Drogon are the same. But it's the best dragon behind, well, Rhaegal's a little bit more efficient, but Viserion as a 2-drop is really good as well. And he's really good because, of course, an event we're going to get to very soon. Dracarys, I keep talking about it, but we'll get there. All right. So the final card here is Viserys Targaryen, 1 for 1. So what's really great about him is that he helps you with that 7-1-0 setup. You're now running 6 cards that go alongside Dany that can allow you to do the 7 gold Dany, 1 gold Chuddy character. So Viserys Targaryen is really good because of this ability. Interrupt when Viserys Targaryen leaves play, choose an attachment, and discard it from play. This lets you protect your Dany from Milk of the Poppies and other negative attachments. And there's a lot of different negative attachments in the broader card pool that we can't go over here, but it protects your locations from location hate. It protects just a lot of various negative attachments are probably the only kind of attachments that really see a lot of competitive play. And Viserys gives you a really easy, really good answer to that. Yeah, and he's just efficient, 1 for 1. Helps you with that 7-1 setup. Really powerful. As your card pool expands, there's a lot of tricks you can do, Viserys Targaryen. And if your opponent is running a positive attachment, you get to hit that too. So all in all, really good. All right, now we get into the locations. Now, 9 of them are economy locations. There's Illyrio's Estate, which you kneel to reduce the cost of the next Targ card you play this phase by 1. Oh, excuse me, you marshal by 1. It's marshal in action, so it only works for locations and characters and attachments. Those are the things you marshal. King's Road, which reduces, you kneel and sacrifice it to reduce the cost of the next character you marshal by 3. Now, King's Roads are a trap in some ways because they give you the +1 initiative as well, which is really useful, and you got to remember it. But they don't give you any. They're burst economy, right? So they don't give you any long-term staying power. So actually, like, King's Roads are really good at just being explosive on the board, getting Dany, Drogon, and Khal Drogo all out on the same turn, really strong. But if your opponent has a reset or your opponent has answers to at least one of these powerful characters you just spammed out, you're out of luck because you haven't created any stable economy. So King's Roads, at least in my opinion, giving advice to new players, is probably stronger in the middle turns than it is early on, because once you have your economy set up and you just need something that's going to push you over the edge, King's Roads are great for that. Now, King's Roads, people always remember the blowouts that King's Roads give them. They don't always remember those times that they popped their King's Road early and they didn't see any other limited cards, and they're in a lot of trouble. But one of the reasons why we're running building orders is to try to get around that, to try to stop that from happening. So you can see your Illyrio Estates or the other economy card that you're running, Rose Road, the most basic economy card. Neutral, 0 cost, Westeros, limited, +1 economy. Now, the limited keyword, wait, here's another keyword that doesn't interact with challenges. I'm a crazy person. Anyway, I totally forgot that there are all of these non-challenge based keywords. But anyway, limited basically means you can only play 1 limited card per turn. What does it basically mean that? It means that. So that basically means that, like, economy cards are a lot like Magic lands. You can only play 1 per turn unless you cheat them in. There's no ways in the core set really to cheat them in, so you're only going to play 1 per turn. Now, I'm going to give you some hot tip here. You can't dupe, and of course, dupes are multiples of uniques, and we'll talk more about dupes in a second. So if you have a unique economy location, like, for example, the Arbor from Tyrell, or Redwine Straits from Tyrell, you play that card. You can't immediately dupe it because it's still considered a limited card. So you can only play 1 limited card per turn, even if that limited card is unique, even if that limited card you're playing is a duplicate. This doesn't really mean much in the core set experience, but it's something to remember and is very much a meme in the community. All right, so last but not least in locations is your only location that does anything besides provide you with gold, and that's Plaza Punishment. After you win, it's 3 costs, so it's expensive. After you win a power challenge, kneel Plaza of Punishment to choose a character without attachments. Until the end of the phase, that character gets -2 strength and is killed if its strength is 0. All right. This is really strong. This is one of your ways of putting your pressure on your opponent. So let's look at the ways it works. 1, it works with Dany. If Dany is standing, the character you're triggering this on is with it. This basically turns this into a -3 if the character is in the challenge with you, or if the character enters a challenge. Now, what Pause of Punishment does that end is killed if its strength is 0 is that's called a terminal effect or terminal burn. That's the term in the community for it. Those are pretty rare. They become a little bit more common, but they're pretty rare. And so this is a powerful effect. It's super good with your Unsullied to push that through. Again, it's got a power icon, that -1 strength. If you throw the Dany at -1 on top of that, you're going to push it through. It allows you to do things like Plaza of Punishment with the power challenge with the Unsullied. Win. Trigger your Plaza of Punishment. Kill one of their low strength characters. Khal Drogo, military challenge 1. Drogon, military challenge 2. That is super hard for a lot of decks to put up with. That's a 3 claim turn. That's 3 characters that are leaving the board that turn, unless they can win one of those military challenges. But even if they can win 1, but they can't win the second, that's 2 characters you've killed that turn. Really, really, really strong. Pause of Punishment is one of your win conditions. It's one of your ways of whittling your opponent's board down to unlock the potential of your March to the Wall, or unlock the potential of your Khal Drogo's multiple military challenges. And it also synergizes really well with the burn event we'll get to in a second. It also works on defense. Now, this is something I still screw up sometimes, which is, your opponent does a weak power challenge to you, you defend, you trigger Pause of Punishment, boom, kill their character. Now, without attachments is a drawback. You don't. It's not a huge drawback, but it sometimes is one. And again, it synergizes extremely well with just everything your deck wants to do. It helps you push through military claim. It helps you win power challenges to get you to your win condition. It makes your Dracarys more threatening. It makes just doing power challenges against you very nightmarish, particularly if you've got Dany in play. Which again, so they do a power challenge. They're like, oh, you know, I think I can win it. You defend with Dany. You burn one of their characters with the Dracarys we're going to get to, and suddenly, they lost the power challenge. You trigger Illyrio's estate, excuse me, not Illyrio's estate, positive punishment. One of their characters dies, and everything's got out of control. See, the thing about Targaryen and why it's really useful for you as a starting competitive deck is there's just a lot of moments for you to unravel your opponent's game plan. And the primary way you unravel your opponent's game plan is this card down here, Dracarys or Drac. All right, Dracarys, Drac. All right, sorry, John Bruno. Drac is a one-cost event. Action. Kneel a dragon character or Daenerys Targaryen to choose a participating character. Until the end of the phase, that character gets -4 strength and is killed if its strength is 0. Really strong. This, down to today, this core set card is still one of the strongest cards in the format. Now, let's get the weaknesses out of the way. Weaknesses, the character has to be participating. All right? So that means they have to go into a challenge. And your opponent, when they see your Targaryen house card, particularly Targaryen fealty, they are going to be like, oh, shit. There's going to be a Dracarys in this game, at least one, maybe 2 Dracaryses in this game. And I need to play around that. Your opponent knows it's coming. There's no point in you fighting against your opponent knowing that it's coming. But it gives you a lot of options. All right? Now, that's the downside. The character has to be in the challenge. So if your opponent doesn't put their best character in the challenge, you can't kill it with Dracarys. But they're going to eventually have to put their characters into challenges. It's just the way Game of Thrones works. They're going to have to, because then you're just whacking away at them and you're going to win the game. So, how to leverage Dracarys. So you have a lot of things that leverage Dracarys. First, you're running all 3 dragons at 3x, because again, we're in the core set, but at 3x. So you're going to see them. Drogon. Drogon is usually the one that you want to kneel for this, or Viserion, because they're, well, one, Drogon's a monocon, so there's not a lot you can do with him besides military challenging. Viserion, because he's cheap. So you have to kneel dragon. That's a part of the cost. You can use Magister Illyrio to kneel your dragon, Dracarys them, and then stand that dragon up to use it in a challenge. Or that's probably more common you're going to do with Dany. And of course, kneeling Dany to use a Dracarys is probably an effective last resort. But it's definitely something you should do if it's going to blow your opponent out. Dracarys synergizes really strong with Plaza Punishment. Your opponent attacks with a character that has 5 strength. Boom. They attack with them. Boom. You Dracarys them. The character doesn't die. Maybe they even win that challenge. But you come back at them with a power challenge. You Plaza Punishment. The character's dead. It means that you can kill characters with up to 6 strength, right? Because it's until end of phase. Dracarys is also until end of phase, right? So if you can synergize this, if you can hook it up with Plaza Punishment, you are going to be able to kill up to 6 strength characters. With Dany, if that character is in a challenge, you can hit up to 5 strength characters. If you're attacking with the Unsullied with a standing dragon, that means you can hit up to 5 strength characters with Dracarys. It makes your opponent really, really frightened. Dracarys is your most powerful tool. And so for new players, so there's 2 things to understand. So you need to be a little careful with what you Dracarys. You just don't be firing off Dracaryses left and right, because you only have 3 of them in the deck. But your ideal Dracarys, obviously there's the blowout moments where you get Dany up and your opponent attacks with Mace Tyrell, which is one of the most powerful characters in the format. He generates power every time a Tyrell character comes into play, and he can also bring Tyrell characters in and out of play. Really powerful card, one of the best. Your opponent, for some reason, attacks with him or defends with him when you have a standing dragon and you have Dany. You Dracarys Mace every time, all the time. where we'll, whirlwind smash that Dracarys onto the board, killing them. But most of the time, particularly when you're playing at a regional level event, your opponents aren't going to make misplays like that. So your ideal target for Dracarys is to drac somebody who's a nice middle tier character, the kind of character that your opponent needs to push through challenges, but is also willing to risk. Because you got that character off the board, that can also, it just means that they now have to start using their other characters in challenges, which gives you the opportunity to to Dracarys them again, or to do a variety of other bad things to them. Forcing, could set them up for a march to the wall. It could set them up to get Plaza Punishment. It's just forcing them and whittling their board down is one of the main things that you use Dracarys for. All right, so Dracarys with some other tricks. Oh, so you can attack with Dany. Your opponent defends. You still win the challenge, though, because they have, say, 5 strength. And they're like, okay, defend, cool. You win the challenge with Rhaegal, boom. Win the challenge, use Rhaegal, boom. Stand Dany up. Oh, now you Dracarys, that 5 strength character is dead. Dead. Let's see, what else can you do, basically, just out of the core set with it? Of course, the Unsullied interaction, which just opens up a huge amount of, it, again, is a attacking version of Dany, where, again, because Dany works attacking attack or defense. Anytime someone's participating in a challenge against you, they get the -1, attack or defense. Unsullied is a one-sided, only attacking Dany, but Unsullied, 1 gold, Standing Dragon, go. You're probably gonna get that military, or you're probably gonna get that power challenge through. And if it's a power challenge, you're gonna start wearing around their chuds with Plaza Punishment. That's how Dracarys opens up play. Now, the other major thing, almost forgot about it before I moved on to Fire and Blood, is fealty. So, kneel your faction card to reduce the cost of the next loyal card you marshal or play this phase by 1. Now, an important play pattern you just got to do. If you don't need to use fealty for gold, for money in the marshaling phase, which you should try to avoid doing. Now, obviously, if playing Dany is the best play for you that turn, play Dany. But a better move is to use all your gold to pay Dany. Then your first action, you go into the challenges phase. So the way the beginning of the challenges goes is first player, say you're second player in this case. You ask the first player, any actions before challenges? They say no. You immediately say, I kneel my faction card for fealty, which now means for the whole rest of the phase, you are bluffing Dracarys. This is the standard Targ play. The standard Targ play. It means that at any challenges phase, you can be bluffing Dracarys, or you can play Dracarys. Right, so you can pay all your gold for all these characters that we've got here, and Dracarys, because it's a loyal event, can be played with the fealty reduction. It opens up the rest of your gold for your other events, which we'll talk about a little bit in a second as well. So, really powerful. Dracarys is probably the second best card in your deck. Somewhere, the 3 best cards in your deck are Dany, Khal Drogo, and Dracarys. And Dracarys is probably not as good as Dany in just this core set environment because you need this character for the challenges, but it's probably the second best. All right, Fire and Blood. Now, Fire and Blood is a pretty good card in general. So let me read it first. So event, cost 1, it's loyal, so it also synergizes with fealty. Choose a unique Targ character in your dead pile, shuffle it back into your deck. If that character is a hatchling, you may put it into play instead. Okay, Fire and Blood is here for a lot of reasons. If something bad happens to your Dany, or something bad happens to your Khal Drogo, something bad happens to your Magister Illyrio, or you have to kill Viserys Targaryen to get a good attachment off Dany, like a Milk of the Poppy off Dany, you can get that character back. And because we're running a core set, we're running 3 of everybody, which we're doing for a couple of reasons. One, we're running with only a core set. We have to run 2 or 3 of everybody. Secondly, dupes are good. Dupes are one of the most powerful effects in the game. So, besides plots, the other main mechanic that separates Game of Thrones from a lot of other card games is the dead pile. The way the dead pile works, of course, is unique characters, when they're killed, they get placed into the dead pile. Well, all characters unique or non-unique, get placed in the dead pile. Doesn't mean anything for non-unique. You can, if you have another copy of it. So if one of your handmaidens gets killed and you draw another handmaiden, you can just play that card. But if your Dany gets killed and you draw another Dany, that's a dead draw. Ooh, that's bad. So what a duplicate means is, so you have your Dany in play, you draw another Dany, you can place it face down underneath your Dany, or face up, it doesn't matter. Face down, face up, face down, whatever. Place it underneath your in-play Dany, and that counts as a duplicate. And a duplicate means if any effect that would cause that Dany to leave play, you can discard the duplicate to save it, to prevent it from leaving play. That's any type of leaving play effect. So that means dead, so they play an event that kills her, or they play a plot that kills her. Nope. Goodbye. It means shuffling them into your deck, so they have some effect that shuffles Dany into your deck. Say, nope, my dupe stops that. Remove from the game? Nope. Stop. Discard? Nope. Stop. Dupes are extremely powerful, so that's why having 3 Danys is really important, having 3 Khal Drogos. It means the fact that you're running 3, which is the max, you're going to see Dany, particularly again with our summons, our counting coppers, pulling these, drawing cards, searching the cards out, tutoring them out. So we've got 3, we're going to see it. We're going to see duplicates. We're going to be able to play duplicates to protect our Dany, to protect our Khal Drogo. But the drawback is if something happens before draw variance allows you to get Dany, a second copy of Dany. So say you set Dany up, your opponent does something to kill her in that first turn, and draw variance said, oh, nope, you don't have a duplicate for her. You're out of luck. She's in the dead pile. But not anymore, thanks to Fire and Blood. So Fire and Blood provides additional redundancy, additional consistency for your deck. If something bad happens to your power uniques that you need, Fire and Blood allows you to get around that. It allows you to shuffle that character back into your deck and go about your business. There's also the second clause, though, on the card. If that character is a hatchling, you may put it into play instead. So what that does is it turns your hatchlings into flexible claim soak. It says, hey, look, I'm in a tough spot here. I'm going to kill my Drogon. And then you Fire and Blood him back in, and he's just in play for free. Well, for 1 gold. So you save 2. You save 1 gold if it's Viserion, you save 2 if it's Rhaegal. But it also brings them into play standing. So there's lots of tricks you can do with this. So besides just the economy of, okay, I just killed somebody for claim soak, oh no, they just came back. Of course, they don't have to die for claim soak. They can be killed by your opponent's plot, they can be killed by your opponent's event or location or whatever, and you can bring them back. But also it lets you do things like, okay, your opponent intrigues you with Tyrion, and Tyrion has 4 strength. So you kneel Drogon, Dracarys, Tyrion. Tyrion dies. Okay. Then your opponent comes with this big military challenge with Tywin and Jaime and the Mountain and all these busted Lannister military icons. You can't defend that. Okay. You defend with you say, you don't even defend. You say unopposed. You kill your Drogon. Okay, Drogon dies. Uh-oh, your opponent's like, uh-oh, okay, it's safe now. There's no standing dragons. All right, my Cersei is going to come in, and my 4 strength, 4 cost Cersei is going to come in, power challenge. Fire and Blood, Drogon comes into play, kneel Drogon, Dracarys, Cersei. Because the character comes into play, it means you are, if you have Fire and Blood, you are always able to get your Dracarys off, even if bad things happen to your dragons. And you can sometimes forcibly have bad things happen to your dragons to get them standing in the challenges phase so that you can Dracarys. Super powerful, super flexible. There's lots of really fun plays that you can do with Fire and Blood. All right, last 2 cards. Tears of Lys, which a former world champion of our game once called the best kill spell in the game, because in many ways it is, besides Dracarys. So this is a 1-cost poison event. Reaction: after you win an intrigue challenge as the attacking player, pick a poison token on a character without an intrigue icon controlled by the losing opponent. At the end of the phase, if that character still has a poison token on it, remove it and kill that character. Maximum per challenge. This supplements all the rest of your game plan here. So it supplements Dracarys, which is going to be removing characters. It supplements Plaza of Punishment, which is going to be removing characters. It supplements, where is he? Khal Drogo, who's giving you multiple military challenges. It's setting up your March to the Walls. So it also lets you hit characters that your opponent, so your Balons, your Randall Tarleys, your Robb Starks. These are characters that are really good, but don't have intrigue icons. And your opponent's not going to put them into challenges because they're like, I'm not putting them into challenges. They can die. You've got Danny standing up and a dragon. Like, my Robb is going to die. He's 5 strength, but he'll die. I'm not putting him in a challenge. Well, if you win an intrigue challenge, Robb's going to die anyway because you just Tears of List them. That's one character off. Now I'm going to do a power challenge. I'm going to hit your Chud. And then I'm going to do a military challenge. And what are you going to do? You've just lost 2 characters. And I'll Drac, the character you're defending with your military challenge. So your board is just wiped. Tears of List is a blowout card. Very, very strong. It sees a little bit less play, but that's simply just because in the broader meta these days, because like targeted kill is like a little bit devalued. But it's in this, again, you don't have a huge card pool. Targeted kill is extremely useful to you, extremely useful to your game plan. And while there are now more characters that have intrigue icons than there were in just the core set, there are still really powerful characters, particularly in Baratheon, particularly in Stark, that are just and of course Greyjoy, that are still just mill power. And so Tears of List just farms those characters, farms them a lot. And then of course the last but not least is Hand's Judgment, the Hand's Judgment technically. Now this is an X cost event. It has an interrupt. When the effects of an opponent's event would initiate, cancel those effects. X is the event's printed cost. So 2 cost event, you pay 2 and you cancel it. So this Hand's Judgment here is to basically protect your events. It's to make sure you can put your Dracarys through, make sure your Tears of List goes through, make sure your Fire and Blood goes through. And as a new player, there's a couple of events that you want to cancel, your opponent's Dracarys, but in particular Nightmares. So Nightmares is a 1-cost neutral event that chooses a character or location, and until the end of the phase, you treat that character or location's printed text box as if it was blank, except for traits. It's basically a one-off Milk of the Poppy, but that also hits locations. That's one of the most powerful cards in the format. Tons of decks are running it because there's a lot of characters you want to blank. You have a juicy target in the form of Daenerys, or you have a juicy target in the form of Khal Drogo, or a juicy target in the form of Plaza Punishment. Hand's Judgment protects that. It protects your Tears of List. It protects your Fire and Blood and your Dracarys from getting canceled. So Hand's Judgment is just there to make sure that your game plan goes through. That's the deck. So again, I want to come around to what's the value of this deck. So again, this deck is not the greatest deck of all time. I think it's a pretty solid Targaryen deck for new players, but it's designed to get you on your feet. So if you're can show up to a local game night, you can show up to a store championship or a regional, and again, I would really recommend that you go to a regional. Regionals are fun, and you can bring this deck to a regional and do okay. I'm not making, again, don't be like Mr. Rogers, this is me in full teacher mode. Roy said, hey, he promised me I would win a regional if I played this core set only Targ deck. No. But you can win some games with it, though. You can definitely go 50-50 with this deck. And that's a huge advantage. Because one of the things that's important to remember, particularly if you're coming out of another card game, is you're not going to win a lot at first, particularly in the highly competitive scene. Particularly if you don't have a full... If you're just buying someone's collection, okay, you can have the full card pool, and, you know, if you have card game skills, you'll just roll people. But if you are naturally buying into the game, like I did when I first started in first edition, or many other people that I know, if you're slowly rolling yourself into this game as a competitive scene, this is the best place to start. And the reason why it's just best place to start is there's lots of cards in this deck that sits in current Targ decks. Now, this is a current Targ deck. This is Alejandro, the co-host of The Wars to Come, and a friend of mine. He top 4'd at Kubla Cup, which is one of the very prestigious tournament in California. He's one of the best Targ players in North America, maybe one of the best Targ players in the world. And this is his Targ list. Let's see there's some cards here that are the same. So we've got March to the Wall, Counting Coppers. There's a whole bunch of new plots. There's a new agenda, The Wars to Come, which allows you to run 10 plot cards, and a second of, two copies of 2 different plot cards. But it's running Drogon. It's running Khal Drogo. It's running Rhaegal. It's running Ser Jorah. It's running Viserion. It's running Viserys. All right. It's running Rose Roads. It's running Dracarys. It's running Fire and Blood. See, it is scaling up. All right. This deck is familiar. Its strategies are not too far away from the strategies that you are employing with your core set deck. Now, the power level of this deck is much higher. Don't get me wrong. It's running much stronger cards, including the new Daenerys, who is just straight up busted. And many, many more powerful plots than you have access to in the core set, including Blood of the Dragon, which, it's a 2/2/1 5 reserve. Each non-dragon character gets -1 strength. Is killed with strength of 0. Super strong Targ card. Or Crown of Gold. These classic Targ cards that came out shortly after the core set did. There's more burn effects and things like that. But the basic strategy is no different than our teeny little underpowered core set deck. If you learn to play this deck well, when you have access to the full card pool and build Alejandro's deck, you'll basically know how to play it. Even though the cards are different, there's some interesting different synergies, but the basic game plan: burn what you can, pressure them with the military challenge, clear their board, march their best character that survives. It's the same strategy. So, hopefully, if you're a new player, you found this video useful. Again, we went over at the beginning how the structure of OP works, and then we went over this deck that Alejandro put together. Well, this deck that Alejandro put together is the terminal point. We went over the deck that I put together that's just core set. Hopefully that was a pretty good discussion for you. If you want to learn more about how to play Targ or play against Targ, I'll link it down below. I made a video about, I didn't use Alejandro's deck because it hadn't been published yet because it was written before, or I did the video before Kublai Khan, but using a similar deck about sort of in-depth Targ strategies. Some of it will overlap with what's in this video, but it will go into more detail about some of the newer cards that Targaryen has. I also have videos about how to play Tyrell and what was the last one that I did? How to play Tyrell. Oh, how to play Martell. Yes, that's the last one I did. And I have a forthcoming video that's going to be about how to play Lannister. So that's a great place to start. Other places I'd recommend are Rob St. John's YouTube channel. There's some great tournament games, including a few featuring me. I'd also recommend South Jersey Thrones, which has, again, tournament games. One featuring me. I'm a little bit more proud of the games that are featured on the Northeast, on the South Jersey Thrones group. That's also on YouTube. And occasionally James and Mike, two South Jersey Thrones, stream, and they have a really great stream. That's a lot of fun. That's a great one to watch. Watch Rob stream when he's streaming Thrones. Rob also travels to events and does some live streaming there. What else? Content. Oh, the White Walkers channel, also on YouTube, has some great gameplay videos that you can go and definitely check out. You can even actually look at this Beyond the Whitebook channel, which has some older videos that are actually kind of a lot of fun. I actually watched one again recently, which are from actually the core set era and into the first chapter pack, which features myself, Aaron Glazer, also from the White Book, a good friend of mine, Dark Naj, former North American champion, Jonathan Andrews is his real name, and Patrick Haynes, who used to be a very serious player before he went off and decided to be young and cool. And we made a bunch of deck building videos that sort of talks about the core set and just the first couple of chapter packs. So that's a good place to start. I'd also again recommend that White Book episode 222, which will also be in the comments, to listen to. That will give you a lot to do. Look at the agot.cards, which is Will's new website that has a lot of the older content and a lot of new content that's focused on new players. And of course, Chris Thompson CT's article about the buy order. So hopefully, if you're a new player, you found this video useful. Feedback below, please, 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 please. I like doing. I mean, I like talking to new players. I like helping new players, so I'll probably do some more videos of this. If there's specific things you want to hear about, I will gladly do videos about them. I'm going to be also doing competitive metagame podcast, not podcasts, videos. The next one, of course, is going to be about Lannister. That actually should be up the same week that this came out because I don't have my dated job this week, so I've got time to make videos. So anyway, that's a long rambling thing to do, so hopefully you found this useful. Leave a comment down below. Oh, also listen to just the White Book in general, because we do a lot of new player-friendly content there as well. So anyway, again, I hope you found this useful, and all feedback is welcome. See ya.